In this video, we will learn inter-VLAN routing. Here, we will be using a router on a stick. We already know that if we have two different VLANs because they are in a different subnet, we definitely need a router in between because we need the traffic to pass from one subnet to another subnet. But we already know in our previous lab we used a router using separate interfaces in which we had configured two interfaces for two different VLANs. But on a router on a stick, we will use one single interface, but we will configure that single interface to multiple VLANs using the single interface as a multiple sub interface. So let's begin with the lab. So I have taken two pieces connected to a single switch. Okay, and let's consider we are creating two different VLANs, that is VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. Name the VLAN as a sales VLAN and VLAN 20 as a IT VLAN. Now, you already know if you need to communicate between same VLANs, then definitely you don't need a router. But yes, if you want to communicate from VLAN 10 to VLAN 20, you need a router. Okay, so before that, let's go ahead and create VLANs and then try to see if you can ping, post which we will add a router to this switch and configure our router on a stick. And also at the end of this video, we will verify you should be able to ping from VLAN 10 to VLAN 20. So let's get our first VLAN 10 configured on the switch. So go back to your global configuration, CLI, and enable config T, and I go to my switch port fast Ethernet 0/1 over here because that's the port on the switch which is connected to your PC0 for VLAN 10. So what I will do is, let's go ahead and first create VLANs and name them. So I go and create VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 and name it accordingly. Okay, so go to global configuration and let's create VLANs first. So VLAN 10 and name it as sales. Okay, and then I go back and name, I have another VLAN here that you see. It is VLAN 20. So name it as a VLAN 20. For that, I go to VLAN 20 and name it as a IT. Okay, so let's verify the VLANs present that we have created. So for that, you can just go and type show VLAN brief, and you will be able to see those VLANs that you just created. Okay, but you can observe here one thing, that you have the VLANs created, but you have not yet configured any of the port because all the ports that you see are present in your default VLAN 1. So I need to configure those two ports to these two VLANs that you have created. So let's go ahead and now create a port configured to these VLANs that we just created. Okay, so just minimize. Yeah, so go back to the switch again and I go to global configuration mode. Okay, then go to your switch port which that we have here is fast Ethernet 0/1. Okay, because this is the port on the switch which is connected to your PC, which is in VLAN 10. So switch port. So always remember the connectivity between your host and your switch. This needs to be access port, and it cannot be a trunk port. Okay, so that's what we will do. We will configure access port to the respective VLANs that we just created a while ago. So I go here, so switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN, and the VLAN name was VLAN 10, right? Because that's the one here which is connected to VLAN 10. Yeah. So I keep that as a VLAN 10 here. Okay. So further, I go here and just exit out. Again, go to global configuration mode. Right now, we just created a port on this VLAN, but we have one more port here, fast Ethernet 0/2. You need to configure this port on your VLAN 20. That's what we will configure now. So just go here to global configuration, go to uh, interface fast Ethernet 0/2 because that's connected to your VLAN 20. Switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 20. Okay, so now you have created all the required two VLANs, VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, and also you have configured the respective port numbers present on your switch to these VLANs. So let's verify. Show VLAN brief. Okay, so when you go to show VLAN brief, you are able to see your port numbers here. So you got your port numbers configured. That's what we just did with the help of our um, access mode commands. Okay, so uh, let's go ahead and see if you can ping. I'm sure you know that you will not be able to ping between two different VLANs, but let's verify that. So just try to ping from this PC to this PC, and you can see the packets are dropping. Okay, so let's go to this PC here and try to ping from PC 0 to PC 1. So I ping 10.10.20.10. I have already pre-configured my PCs to these IP addresses. Initially, that's what you get. Request timed out. The reason is because they are in a different subnet. You will not be able to establish connectivity between PC 0 and PC 1 due to different VLANs present in different subnet. So here comes the picture of a, a router. Okay, a router is required here unless the legacy inter VLAN. We had a router which was connected to two different interfaces, and we had a switch earlier and we had a PCs connected. Okay, and you used to configure the port here between your switch and your router as an access port for your legacy inter VLAN using separate interface. Okay, But here, in case of a router on a stick, that is what is that we are going to configure. We have a router here. So this is router on a stick. You don't need to configure access port. Unlike here, you had access port between the switch and router here. You just need to have a trunk connectivity. You are going to establish a trunk between your switch and your router. And using one single interface, you will create two sub interfaces. The reason is because you have two VLANs. Okay, so those sub interfaces will belong to VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 here. Okay, and yes, definitely, since we are using trunk, you need to ensure that your sub interfaces are also configured as an encapsulation dot 1q. Okay, the only reason is because there's a trunk connectivity. So what happens here, your router will understand the packets that you sent from VLAN 10. It goes to your switch. Okay, it goes to your switch and then goes to the router, and the router understands the destination address. So it understands, okay, you're going to VLAN 10, and comes back downstream to your switch and goes to your destination PC. So that's how you can establish connectivity here for 100%. But so you need to have a router. So let's go ahead and add a router for our topology that we have created. Okay, so let's take a router. I'll take the 2911 routers. Okay, then connect it with a single interface. You don't need to have two separate interfaces, unlike the legacy router with separate interfaces for inter VLAN. So let's keep one single interface. But you know very well that any router, when connected, the status of this interface is shut down. You will need to turn on the interfaces. So, but before that, you also need to ensure that you are going to change the status of this fast Ethernet 0/3 to a trunk port. Okay, so you are going to configure your switch port over here for fast Ethernet 0/3 to trunk port. Okay, and you will also tell your router not to use any IP address. You will tell the router no IP address. Okay, and you will also turn on this interface using no shut command. Okay, so first let's go ahead and configure trunk for this port that you see here. So let's first form a trunk connectivity between your switch and your router. Okay, so go back to your switch, enable mode, global configuration, interface, fast Ethernet 0/3 over here. That's what you see here, right? You see the port number is 0/3. Okay, and this is supposed to be a trunk and not a access, unlike legacy inter VLAN. Okay, so I go to switch port mode trunk. That's what you see here. Your switch has been configured as a trunk port now. Exit out. Okay, so if you want to verify whether you have a trunk configured over here, just keep show interface fast Ethernet 0/3 switch port. Okay, and yeah, you can see there is a trunk that you have formed between your router and your switch, and with the .1q encapsulation. However, it's on a native VLAN because we have not configured any VLANs on this port. Okay, we just had configured VLANs over here and here, not on this particular port so far because we want to have a trunk connectivity between your switch and your router. Okay, so second step that you're supposed to do here is you are going to tell this router. Okay, so first step was you had formed a trunk between your switch and your router. So second is you will tell this router no IP address, and you will turn on this interfaces on your router with this no shut command. Okay, let's do this second step on your router. Go back to your router, go to CLI, say no because you do not want to go back to the initial setup. So just say no. Enable mode, and I have to go to my port that you see on your router. This is gigabit 0/0. So I go to this interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0. Okay, and you are telling the router not to use IP address because you are going to configure that port to sub interfaces in respect to the VLANs that you have on your network diagram. Okay, so here what you do, you just tell the router no IP address. Okay, yeah, and you are going to turn on this interface here that you see here, that you see it's shut down now. So you need to turn this interface on. So just give no shut. Okay, so you can see that the interfaces are turning from red to orange, and yeah, in few minutes you get that with a green indicator which says that the interfaces are now changed to up. Okay, okay, so what is the next step? So you have your VLANs here, yeah, but before that you also need to configure a default gateway to each of the PC. So let's go ahead and assign a default gateway and also assign IP address on your sub interfaces for gigabit 0/0. So what you can do is just go back to your IP configuration on your PC. Okay, but before that, let's do IP configuration here. Let's just name the IP address. Say for example, you will name it as a 10.10.10.1 with a net mask of 24 here. Okay, and yeah, this is for VLAN 10. But what is the interface? It will be gigabit 0/0.10. That's how your sub interfaces look like. Okay, and we will configure that just in a while. So go back here, give a name to give an IP address for your sub interface for your VLAN 20. So I will take 10.10.20.1, and this is for def VLAN 20. Yes, and this is on sub interface gigabit 0/0. I'll keep it as dot 20 so that for me it's easy to understand that this belongs to sub interface VLAN 20. Okay, so now what we have done is we just named our sub interfaces. Let's go ahead and configure this as a default gateway for each of our PCs here. So go back to your PC. Initially, you have given IP addresses for your computers. So 10.10.10.10. Your default gateway is what you see here. This is your default gateway for this PC. This is default gateway for this PC. Okay, so you can give it as 10.10.10.1. So this was your default gateway that you see here. This is VLAN 10. Sorry about that. Okay, so here you go to PC here and you need to give your default gateway. Yeah, this your PC. Yeah, just verify you had 10.10.20.10. This you know very well that this is a default subnet mask for class A. Your default gateway is 10.10.20.1. Okay, so you have assigned the default gateway now. So what is the next step? You are going to configure a sub interfaces. So how do we do that? Just go to global configuration on your router. Okay, just exit out of this. Yeah. Okay, go to interface, gigabit Ethernet 0/0.10. Okay, so that this is easy for me to understand that this is a sub interface for VLAN 10. You always keep in mind whenever you are going to assign an IP address for sub interface, you need to always give encapsulation.1q. So go to encapsulation.1q, and this is going to be a VLAN ID 10. What does this 10 indicate? 10 indicates this is your VLAN ID number. Okay, yes. So what I do here, go back to configuration of IP address. You're going to configure IP address here. So I give 10.10.10.1 and your net mask 255.255.255.0. Okay, and definitely you don't need to give no shut because you have already turned on the interfaces. Okay, so just give Control Z, you exit out, but you have one more sub interface because you have one more VLAN here, VLAN 20. So let's go ahead and configure. So interface gigabit 0/0, but yeah, with a sub interface for 20, give encapsulation dot 1q and your VLAN ID. This 20 is nothing but your VLAN ID number. Okay, yeah, so just give that VLAN ID number here and your IP address 10 dot. The IP address that you need to give here is the IP address of this default gateway that you had earlier configured on this PC. Okay, so give that IP address 10.10.10.1 20.1 with a net mask to 55.255.255.0 and then exit out. Okay. Now, you would like to verify what IP address I have on my gigabit bit 0/0, right? So you can just give show interface brief command. Brief, show IP interface brief. You can see your sub interfaces over here. Okay, this is your sub interfaces, correct? That's what you have assigned here. So you can see that sub interfaces have been assigned, the rest are unassigned. Okay, so now let's verify if you can. This is the final step that you are going to verify that you are able to ping from VLAN 10 to VLAN 20 and see if you have a connectivity between these two VLANs, though they are in a different subnet. Okay, so let's verify the output. So go back to your PC and I go here to ping my PC1 from PC0, which are in different VLAN. So ping, what is the IP address that you see here? It's 10.10.20.1, right? So just give the same 10.10.20.1. Let's see if you are able to ping between the two VLANs. I mean, two different VLANs in different subnet. So you're getting reply. So you can see that the ping is successful. So this completes the lab for inter VLAN routing, where you have used router on a stick and you have one single interface where the data has passed from the PC lying in a VLAN 10 to the switch and to the router, and downstream from the switch back to your destination VLAN that you were trying to ping from this sales VLAN to IT VLAN. I hope that this video has been helpful to you all. See you in the next video.